Welcome to Branching Out, Growing Together, the podcast where we explore the challenges, opportunities, and stories shaping the chestnut industry and beyond. Whether you're a grower, researcher, or enthusiast, this podcast is your connection to innovation and community. Join us as we branch out, grow together, and make an impact one story at a time. And now, here's your host, Melanie Jones.
So let's just dive right into this. When you were a child, you had everything planned out. You had your life orchestrated, almost like what a chestnut farmer might be, like, okay, these are all the things I'm going to take and do and plan. And then things didn't go quite exactly to plan. Is that right?
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Tell that story. I think from a listening perspective of farming and how we deal with things, it parallels your journey. And that's why I want you to kind of share it with us.
Everything for me in my life I've noticed really goes back to curiosity. I started by reading an alternative newspaper in my hometown of Houston. It really just sparked my curiosity because it was the first time I'd ever experienced media that was telling stories that were different than what I saw in my local news or our different local papers at the time. And it was telling stories about just our community and the diversity of Houston's community, different lifestyles, music, restaurants than what I'd previously been exposed to. And by the time I'd finished the magazine, I was just like, this is what I absolutely have to do. I have to also tell these stories and get involved in this in some sort of way.
And you were quite young when that happened, weren't you?
Yeah, I was 12 when I did that, and I just knew, I was like, "Whatever I have to do, I have to fully devote myself to journalism." So, I remember very, very well when I was maybe 17, 18. I looked at my mom and I was like, "I'm going to community college. That's what I'm gonna do." She was like, "Okay, why? Is this what you're gonna do?" And I said, "'Cause I don't wanna be bothered with any of the the coursework to get my degree. I just care about journalism and using my time really strategically when I'm in school. So I wanna go to community college, get all of my basics out of the way. So basically, when I get to a university, I am just maximizing my time with my professors, with my classmates, with, connections that I can be doing. It's like I'm networking from the moment I hit there. So I did that. I got to community college, and the first thing that I did was I started applying for internships because I was like, I'm in school. I can be unpaid labor. Of course, I just have to have a school to list. And so I started interning everywhere that I possibly could and really use those internships to be able to tell the stories that I wanted to tell. It was all music publications, but still the artists that I wanted to focus on, the journeys that I wanted to kind of go through. And just really utilizing just that basic curiosity, like I said, to its fullest extent.
That's interesting, and it's always a good idea whenever possible to learn from those who know what you want to learn, and so that was smart of you. And so then, you kind of progressed past that, and then what happened? Did you go right into journalism?
Oh, I did not. I did all of that and then got out of school right at the time that most newspapers were either being combined and kind of gobbled up into larger groups or just going out of business. So it was a great time to enter into journalism. And unfortunately, we weren't at the period that we are now with internet journalism being as far as it was. If you have no previous, like, accolades or publications, you still could jump in you couldn't jump in back then.
Mhm.
And so I instead took a job at a tennis store because at that time I was really interested in playing, and, so it just felt like a natural fit also because I followed the sport. And the role when I got there was guaranteed to be a little bit of graphic design, which I was studying at the time because 'cause I'd gone back to community college to get an associate's in it. And, it was gonna be a little bit of graphic design, a little bit of video, a lot of writing, and so it all seemed like, "Okay, this is gonna keep my portfolio going just while I figure out what's next," or this role could grow into who knows what. And it did combine some of those things, but for the most part, it just was not the right fit, especially after I'd finished my internship, prior to that job, which was at the actual, newspaper that I read when I was 12 that made me wanna become a journalist. That was my last internship. And so leaving that of going to concerts and writing about music and doing what I was passionate about, leaving that to just take a job really wasn't the right fit for me. It really irked me, and pretty much every day that I went to work. And so I, kind of took a leap of faith and found a random posting on Craigslist and showed up to a job interview surprised that it actually was real and that it was, at Clear Channel, which is now iHeartRadio, and I started my career in radio, which was a totally different pivot because I had said, "I never wanna work in radio. I absolutely don't." I had all of these opinions about it based off of, some people that I went to school with and kind of their personalities and then other, personalities that I'd interacted with, and I just said, "I don't wanna be involved in this at all." And so my vision for even that job was like, "You'll stay here for 2 years, everyone knows who this is, and then you'll pivot back into some form of journalism." That 2 years turned into 6 and running the department that I'd originally started in, and so it was a longer period for me of that transition, but it also allowed me to stay involved with storytelling, and then also, again, with what I was passionate about of, well, how do we storytell for different audiences, and then learning who they are as people to make sure we're delivering the kind of stories that matter to them and can make a difference, and I got to do that across 6 different stations with multiple personalities also, our on-air staff as well, and it was it was a really great learning experience, that I then transitioned over to Austin, where I now live, and still working within radio, but I got to do live events, which was so much more interesting and fun because you're dealing with the public and really getting real-time feedback when you're at an event or giving them these unique experiences to interact with artists in ways that they never thought that they were gonna get to interact, and, it still was just another path for me with storytelling, and I eventually took that over into advertising, traditional advertising, where that was a completely different field that I kinda dived into again out of curiosity, and then, once I was actually in it, I was like, "Wow, this is completely different than anything I've ever known." I am almost like I'm learning on the spot and on the job how the role that I do is very similar, but it's also completely different when you get here, and then also learning, how to work in, like, a very high stress, but then very time-consuming environment. It all pushed me to where I am now after taking a brief sabbatical and really figuring out, okay, well, what matters to me and what do I want to do? I was able to then land where I am now.
Isn't it true that journalism has changed a little bit when it's integrated with social media and, everything that's happening on the digital front, that you still are in journalism, just not in the way your 12-year-old self thought you would be?
Yeah, I mean, it completely has. And I mean, really, the way that I look at it is that my 12-year-old self took journalism because it was okay, I can tell stories, but I'll be able to make somewhat of a living. Really, at the root of it all, again, like I said before, is curiosity, but it was also just storytelling. Even as a kid, even younger than 12, I loved to tell stories. I loved to get lost in my head and in the possibility of what could be. That something as simple as just, I have a random question that I want an answer to. And now that I have this answer, I have a solution in mind for other people. Like that was something for me that as a kid, I was like, if this, then what if this? And I really badly wanted to find a way to, I guess, do that for a living to be able to help people. And so, yeah, it's taken a turn, or journalism has taken a turn with social media and with other distribution channels for journalism. But it also, I think, still roots in just storytelling and wanting to find ways to connect people to something larger.
2024 was a difficult year, but for both of us personally. My little brother passed away, and your mom, your biggest champion, passed away. So here you find yourself on a pretty stable ground, and then all of a sudden, the rug's pulled out from under you, which is again relates to farming. So many things. So how have you leaned on your past and successes and everything to cope with that?
So it's really interesting. When I think of my past and in comparison of the two, I learned a level of resilience throughout my path and throughout my journey that I did not think I would have to tap into so deeply with this time. I mean, it was initially when she passed, with being involved with planning her service and the coordination and things like that. That was definitely a time of resilience and just kind of like I remember saying to myself very often, this is from Brene Brown, but it's you gotta find your dig deep and just stay in it. To weather this, you're gonna have to just stay in that, dig deep and in that space of resilience and just kind of push through. Another thing that I would also say too is, like I mentioned with my career and with things like that, I took a lot of pivots. I took a lot of turns that were based on just a mixture of curiosity and faith that things would work out. And that was also another thing that during this time period I also had to lean into, is that for me, I was like, I ultimately do not know what I'm doing without this individual in my life who has been here to guide me and to be my advice and my support, my bodyguard at times. And I'm now going to have to somewhat fill this role in my life and also with other people. But I'm going to have to also kind of do the same thing that I've done in the past, which is just to have that mixture of curiosity of like, what could be, and then also faith that at the very least, it's all going to work out the way that it's going to.
People often ask Brad and Melanie Jones what a UMCA PQK seedling is. The University of Missouri Center for Agroforestry seedlings descend from an orchard with three well-characterized grafted cultivars. Peach, Ching, and Cork, the orchard environment generated a seedling population of three full sibling families. As an approved growing partner for the university, Brad and Melanie are thrilled to offer the UMCA PQK seedlings from their Kentucky-based nursery, United Chestnut. Visit unitedchestnuts.com for more information about this seedling and others available. Consider subscribing to the weekly blog and tuning into the Chestnut Industry Podcast, Branching Out. That was unitedchestnuts.com.
I think, having a sense of community, whether it's family, friends,
Mhm.
helps all of us, and when we're in challenging times like that. And then to layer on top of that, I understand that you discovered that you have, ADHD. That's a curveball for sure, and how are you doing with that?
Discovering that was like finding the missing piece of the puzzle. You know, suddenly all the struggles that I had just kind of chalked up to laziness or being behind had an explanation. So knowing I had ADHD allowed me to stop fighting myself and start working with myself instead. And it's definitely not without its challenges. Like I still leave cabinet doors open and get frustrated when I lose focus or when something's not where I think it should be on a different day. But it's all helped me to approach life with more patience, definitely more self advocacy, and then just tools that work for me instead of against me.
Yeah. Oh, that's almost magical. So thank you for sharing that. I think it takes some bravery to open up and tell our stories, but if it helps one person, it's so worth it. So you are not a physical farmer, although you love the outdoors and you know an awful lot about chestnuts. Having been the producer of this podcast and helping with United Chestnuts and the overall awareness of the chestnut community, tell me a little bit about the podcast and why it's so important from your perspective for the chestnut community.
Why I think that this podcast is so important is that you bring out different guests that just encompass so many different parts of this. Like we've had legends in the chestnut industry, but then also just recently Jessica Shade, who could talk about just getting into farming and what the US government has to offer farmers, and just so many different voices that connect to this bigger story and this bigger puzzle. And so that's why I find it to be really interesting wherever someone finds themselves in their chestnut journey.
And why is storytelling like, let's dive back into that subject a little bit
Mhm,
because maybe some of the listeners don't even know what that means. Why is that so important in your view to help the chestnut become more, for people to be more aware of it in the United States and the history and all that's a whole nother topic. But
mhm.
why is what you do for a living so important to help this industry grow?
Well, I mean, not just the chestnut industry, but every industry. I always advise having some sort of sense of story. It really, because it allows people to connect to the why of a brand or of a farm, whatever it may be. Even just a person. It allows someone to connect to the why and then also see themselves, to feel that natural connection. Like that's really where the story is rooted. Allowing others to be able to see just how am I part of this in some sort of way, like discovering something new, discovering a new part of yourself as well.
Yeah. Yeah, because everyone has a story. We talked about that. We're developing obviously a brand for United Chestnuts, but we want to help everyone have this sense of you have your own story, you can create your own brand, and then collectively, like other industries have done, we are helping consumers connect with a product that's mostly forgotten in the United States. How do you define storytelling in the context of social media?
In the context of social media, I think of storytelling as its own unique opportunity because every social media platform is also so different in what they curate and how they generate content to go to people based on their interests. When you get into a social media space, it's so incredibly confusing when you first start out. And you're going, I've got all of these different platforms, but how do I figure out who my people are? How do I figure out where things were supposed to go? So you have to look at every platform what its intention is, and then go back to that storytelling, like we said before, of your why. Why am I doing this? Why am I starting this brand? Why am I, what is it about my product that I hope people take away, or why I think that my product is of value to other people? And really then looking at, like I said, the different platforms and how they tell stories, what their intention is for audiences, and then finding that mix, that collaboration and connection between your product, what you want to do, and then your why, and then matching that to, okay, this is what the social media platform, this is what their why and their purpose is, and this is where we overlap. Let me use that to find my people.
And it's a little bit tricky, and the more you get into it, the more you understand it's complex. So, one of my whys at United Chestnuts is to be a resource for people who want to have their own piece of land and maybe have a crop that's not too complicated to make some extra money. And so that's one of the reasons I think we've agreed, you and I together, that we will have United Chestnuts as more of a resource go to page where we can have some information, say, about this topic to help others because we really need everyone to succeed to elevate the industry. So I don't know if you have one or two quick tips that you can share now, or we'll put it on the website for how people can engage more in social media storytelling and, building their brand.
Again, it goes back to finding your people. So, it's that unfortunately is a lot of work. Thankfully, there are different tools which I can, put in the blog afterwards, but there are different tools to be able to sort of streamline this. But I say it's finding your people in the sense of you have the United Chestnuts Facebook page. So that is being able to find a group and like-minded community, and then being able to go into there and say, okay, out of all of these people, who can I collaborate with? Who can I reach out to and speak with? And then also kind of pitch different ideas for content, which content doesn't have to be what you and I are doing with this podcast, with the video cast, with all of the different segments and kind of other pieces of content that we collaborate on to build. It could also just be, I want to do a guest post. I see that you, Melanie, have X amount of followers, and I would love to do a guest post about my product or about what I'm doing. I would love to do a guest post on your blog about that. If you feel like you're a really good writer, or if you feel like you have a great story to tell that you just want to live on Facebook, that's a really great place to start, is building a community within your own existing community, collaborating together to kind of amplify and share one another's voice. It starts there. I would also argue, like, while yes, you do need a website, your website doesn't have to expand into a blog and into all of these other big pieces of content. It can start with, I have my website with my product to get me going. I'm going to build my community, and then I'll look to other people for resources on, I do want to start a blog. I do want to start writing ebooks. I do want to start a podcast. You just then begin
Yeah,
looking for other resources within the community for help.
that's fantastic. You told me the other day that you feel like the digital landscape is the new Wild West. Let's open that up just a little bit. Like where are we going, and what do you see?
So when I said that to you, I was thinking back to when I first started my career. I was very, very fortunate in that time period because Facebook was essentially the Wild West. We would describe it that way all the time because we could program a Facebook page for, we'll say, for a morning show to where down to the exact moment they would talk about a story, or we knew that they would take that last breath and then a song would play, we would then have the story go out on Facebook in real time where we could we teased it on air for you to then go to our Facebook page, for you to then go to our website, and we would watch it all in real time because we had it down to that level of a science because we could do that. Now you can't because it's a matter of when someone's on, what their interest is, and just so many other things. But we're kind of getting back to that with AI. It's disrupting so many different things, but, essentially, with the use of AI, you can get exactly what you're looking for down to the exact keyword, the exact key phrase, and it kind of opens things up in a much bigger way for content creators, just in the sense of, you never know where and how your content is going to show up and how it could be at that first page. It could be pulled into a resource with an AI search engine. There's just so many possibilities that's kind of out there as content is now being served up in a more personalized way.
Yeah. Yeah, the, incorporation of data is just so powerful, and I think this year, speaking of the second day of the year, that, we'll see so much progress in that, and hopefully it's leans towards all good. Well, are there any other last, tidbits you'd like to share, either personally or related to storytelling and content creation?
Content creation is something that can be really daunting at first. I am fully able to acknowledge that. Every project that I kick off, I'm just like, how are we going to be able to do this? I feel that way after honestly every recording. I'm like, how are Melanie and I going to get all of this done and all of this out? And yet every month we're able to. But while it is initially daunting to figure out, it is honestly really worthwhile in the end because it allows I would argue it allows a lot of people to be able to find their voice. They're able to find kind of a lane and a space that, they maybe previously didn't think would be available to them. It allows you to really find a way to share a piece of yourself if you're, capable of being that vulnerable and that open about what your journey and, what's going on, but it allows you to find your voice really authentically, and then it also allows you to connect with people in that way as well, and in deeper ways than what you expected. Like, you and I have talked about, with the podcast, how many times people have come to the farm and said, "Oh, I found your podcast. Oh, I was listening to your podcast." And that's what made me make this appointment and come out here and wanna see everything and really wanna get involved, and so that's for you and I, I'm like, that's really rewarding because we started this just with the idea of there's so many stories to tell with people that are in this industry, and everyone is connected in certain ways, but not to the fullest extent that it can be. And so to have that real-time feedback has been really great for us. And so, yeah, it's just like I said, it's acknowledging that it's daunting, but it also, in the long term, it does just honestly like farming. It ends up being really rewarding because you're able to find both a different path for yourself, but also just a different people than what you ever expected who
Yeah.
are interested, and you end up creating a very unique community.
Yes. Well, on behalf of the community, thank you for all that you're contributing. We have a long ways to go, but it's fun, and we need to keep it fun. So, here's to a wonderful 2025. Thank you, everyone who tuned in, and stay tuned for other really exciting, interesting guests in 2025.
Thank you for tuning in to Branching Out, Growing Together. We hope today's conversation leaves you inspired and equipped to take the next steps in your own journey. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast and visit unitedchestnuts.com for more resources, stories, and updates. Join the United Chestnuts community on Facebook to connect with like-minded growers and enthusiasts. Until next time, keep branching out and growing together.